I want to talk to you about taking offense. It's kind of complicated to think about all the different aspects of that, but it's really important because we take offense often in our relationships. In other words, we are offended by what somebody does. We carry a feeling of hurt or anger or resentment or sadness or just disappointment, just all the things, something that we carry that basically says, you did something to me that hurt me, you offended me. And it can be manipulative in the sense that people can choose to be offended by whatever they want. There's something in our culture where there is an idea where a person has a right not to be offended, and that is impossible. It is impossible for you to live in this world and never be offended. If you believe that you have a right to not be offended, it would mean that somebody else's rights would have to be stepped on because you would say, I'm offended by your belief, therefore you can't have your belief. It take that to the extreme, and that's so you're telling somebody you can't hold that religious belief or that political belief because that is offensive to me, and I should not be offended. It's impossible. At some point, you would have to decide whose beliefs, whose opinions were not offensive and that were okay to have, and those that were not okay to have. And then that would be the exact opposite of freedom of belief, freedom of association, freedom of choice of your actions and all of those things, which at least in the United States, we have rights to all of those. So I didn't plan on getting into that part of that. It just sort of kind of went there. But let's get back to taking offense in your relationship. So when we all know what it's like to be hurt when somebody does something and it causes us pain, and we can recognize that, and that's perfectly okay to say, wow, I felt hurt by that, I felt upset by that, I felt rejected, I felt put down, I felt embarrassed, I felt disappointed, I was, whatever it is. We're allowed to feel hurt when somebody does something that hurts us, but at the same time we have to be honest with ourselves in our relationships and recognize that feeling hurt is subjective. What hurts one person might not hurt another person, or at least hurt that person to the same degree or in the same way. So being hurt is somewhat subjective. It is also subjective to a person's personality, to a person's past experiences. If you were hurt repeatedly in that way, let's say by a critical parent growing up, then you are much, much more likely to be offended by a person's critical comments than if you were not repeatedly criticized by a parent and that you didn't have a intolerance of that. When something has happened to you in the past and it happens to you in the present, your reaction tends to include the reaction to the present as well as the past at the same time. This is where we get just disproportionate reactions to something that's small in the present because it's been so big in the past. We have to know those things about ourselves. We have to know what triggers our past and causes it to be huge in the present. Another example of that is abandonment. If you were abandoned in the past, any slight perceived abandonment in the present is going to be huge. You are going to feel as if the person is leaving you and doesn't care about you and is never going to be there for you. And literally, the person could just be saying, I'm going to be an hour late, or I'm sorry, I can't make it tonight. I've got work that came up. So it has to do with what has happened to you in the past. That's your stuff. You can't require somebody else to take that on and to walk and operate in a way that never triggers that in you. Now they can care person can care, but they can't control that. That's something inside you. Also, your current state of mind and body. Are you tired? Are you exhausted? Are you stressed? Are you overwhelmed? Are you at your wit's end? Are you just barely ready to explode? Yeah, well, that next thing that happens might be the things that you explode over. That's your stuff. That's the subjective experience that you brought to that interaction that caused you to be highly offended and reactive. And then also how you interpret the person's words and actions based on who you are, your frame of mind, your beliefs, all of those things. And you bring that to the table. And the other person, again, is responsible for their actions. That is what the other person is responsible for. But you are responsible for all of those other things that make up who you are and what you bring to the table and how you react to and interpret that person's action that causes you to be offended. So I'm not saying that it is okay when somebody does something wrong and hurts you, they are responsible for the action. They are not responsible for your reaction, your way of interpreting that. I hope that makes sense. So you want to recognize the hurt that you feel, the emotions underneath it. You want to acknowledge your part to yourself. So you don't have to explain everything to someone else, although you can in a close relationship. The more that the other person understands you, if they're willing, is better, because then that person can also, in dealing with you, not take offense to your reaction, understanding where that came from. So it's kind of mutual and it works for both of your benefit if you can do that. So you can express your why and your feelings and acknowledge that part of your reaction was related to your history, your personality, your way of looking at things, and then work through that together. So there are people, though, that tend to take offense repeatedly, and they just kind of stack up and add more offense, more offense, more offense, more offense. And it's almost as if they become like a walking offended person with the chips on their shoulder. And no matter what, they're just super easy to offend. So you have to recognize that when those people that become bitter, hateful, resentful, attacking, and they're just so wounded and they're so easily offended, you can't take responsibility for that. Those are the people that you would walk on eggshells around, and you cannot be in a situation where you can make sure that you don't offend those people. So just because somebody's offended doesn't mean that you have to feel that you did something wrong, although you can care that that person feels offended, but you can't prevent a person from being offended. Again, you're responsible for your action. You are not responsible for the other person's response or over response to it, but you can care. So we don't want to take a passive position when we're offended and just walk around and just say, oh, you offended me, you offended me, you offended me. We want to take an active response to that. And we want to figure out what's going on with us, what contributed to it, and then we need to make a decision. Do we need to bring it up to the person or not? If it's no big deal, it's a small thing, and you realize, I'm just really stressed today, everything's bothering me. I don't know about you, but I don't have them a lot, but I do have days where everyone bothers me. And I make a joke about it. It's when I feel like I want to push people out of the way with my grocery cart, I know it's me, right? Because there's nothing anybody's doing wrong in the grocery store that should make me feel so impatient. But if I'm super stressed and super annoyed and just exhausted, sometimes I'll just be like, get out of my way, let me get my groceries. Okay, that's me. That is not somebody else standing in my way, not moving their cart. So I hope that's a little bit of transparency there. That happens rarely. Don't be afraid. If you see me in the store, don't be worried if I have a grocery cart. But that's an example of kind of a silly example, but fun at the same time. So So when you feel hurt, consider what things you might have contributed to it. Very important. If it's something small, choose to overlook it. There's two verses. Proverbs 17:9, whoever would foster love covers over an offense, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. So you can cover over an offense. Proverbs 19:11, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Now, but again, it's never all or nothing. So that's examples of when it's okay to overlook an offense. There are times, though, when we know from scripture that you are supposed to bring something to somebody else's attention. In Matthew 18, when it talks about going to someone and saying that these are the things that you're doing that are sin for you or affecting me, we have to go to the person, we speak the truth in love, we confront, do all of those things, and we exhort. All of those things are scriptural at the same time. So it's not to overlook everything. It's to overlook the small things that don't matter. Those things that tomorrow you're not even going to remember. Okay, not going to hurt your relationship. No big deal. You don't have to bring all those up. If it's something big, you have to decide how are you going to bring it up. And when you bring it up, you want to take responsibility for your part. You want to do it at the right time. You want to do it in the right way. You want to ask, is it okay time for me to talk to you about something? Get the person's, don't broadside them when they're busy doing something else. And then you just want to, with the people that do take offense, and you've examined your heart and you know whether, looking at, did you do something wrong? Was there something in your behavior that, or your attitude that could have been different that the person, was hurt by? Acknowledge it, take responsibility, but don't feel like you have to take responsibility for people's sensitivities. You can care that they're triggered from something in their past when you haven't done anything wrong and they just got triggered like you were thinking that you were someone else to them, like maybe a parent. You felt like an angry parent when you weren't. You were just being a concerned spouse or using your right to share what it was that offended you. You don't have to take responsibility for that, but you can care about that. Now, there are times when people are going to be offended and there's nothing you can do about it. That happened a lot to Jesus. Matthew 13:54-57 says, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began to teach the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked, isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where did this man get all these things? Wow. So they're like, wow, he's amazing. He's just an ordinary man, but he's got miraculous powers. And what is the next sentence? What is the next sentence? Listen to this. And they took offense at him. They were amazed by him. They knew who he was. They knew he had miraculous powers. They took offense because of their own stuff, their own beliefs, their own opinions, their own experiences, their own blindness. They took offense. It says, but Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. There are going to be people, maybe you are a Christian and your spouse isn't, or your child isn't. There are going to be people that are going to take offense with your beliefs, your political beliefs, your religious beliefs. There is nothing you can do to keep them from taking offense. Sharing your beliefs, your opinions, your boundaries in love, and they take offense. You can't change that. You're powerless. You can only recognize that you are responsible for your behavior. They own their response, their choice to be offended. You are responsible for your offenses, the ones that you take, in terms of figuring out how much of that is me. I hope that that was a good explanation of a little bit of a complex dynamic that happens. Relationships have so many moving parts to them, so many differences between taking two people that are just filled with a history, personality, all these things, the dynamic between them, the history of your relationship. And this is just one of those things that you really need to understand, though, in terms of what you need to take responsibility for in your relationships and allow other people to take responsibility in their relationships. So, okay, thank you for watching or listening, and I hope that you will be listening to more and watching more. Thank you.